Welcome to Rendering Insights. In this video, we're going to draw a little cartoon hot rod pickup truck. We're going to do some line work in Illustrator and then bring it into Photoshop and put some color on it. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe below. All right, this is the drawing we're going to do. It's going to be a black and white take on this little cartoon. Should be fun. All right, let's get going. Okay, here we are in Adobe Illustrator. A little while back, I sketched out this little hot rod pickup truck with pencils. It's pretty rough and it's not very realistic, but it was something kind of fun for a cartoon. And then now I'm thinking, let's go ahead and do a digital version of this little drawing. So that's what we're doing here. But before we can take our pen tool and trace this thing off in Illustrator, we need to make a little mask layer. We need to cover this with a little piece of tissue paper. So we're going to put a white panel in here, and we're going to back the opacity off to about 40–45% and create a tissue layer. And this is what that looks like. Lay that right on top of our sketch. That way we can still see through this tissue layer and see what we're tracing off, but it won't be so confusing when we have our black lines. On several different layers, I started building this little drawing in just too many different layers, to be honest, but let me show you what some of those lines look like. This is all the basic car lines. It's the body work, wheels and tires, and our driver and so forth. But without that tissue layer, see how confusing that is? You can't even see what you're doing. So that's the whole purpose of that tissue layer. Normally I wouldn't use so many different layers. I mean, this pickup bed is in one layer, and of course I have this line across here because when the tire and wheel are over the top of there, you wouldn't see that. The driver is another layer, the grill shell is another layer. It's kind of crazy. Normally I wouldn't do that, I say, but in this drawing we did, so we'll just deal with it. All right, so there's all our basic car layers. So let's get rid of this tissue paper and this donor layer. So there's our basic lines. Only a couple things missing. He even drew in this layer, his basic tattoos on his arm, but I wasn't sure what I was going to put on this banner. So on another layer, I kind of drew him in, but he's a good guy. So we'll put mom in here and a little heart behind that, and different layer. And let's just establish a little ground line down here so the car's not floating. So that's what that looks like. For the background, much like I did on that Cadillac cartoon video, we want to have kind of a cartoon desert background. So I kind of been looking at like pictures from Utah. They have those amazing shapes and sculptures out there in the desert. So this is what I came up with. These cool, look like Roadrunner cartoon shapes in the horizon. And it did these in a gray tone instead of the black. That way when we color these, this whole thing is going to be done in gray tones, this cartoon. The whole thing, no color whatsoever, just gray tones. When we do this in these gray tones, it will stay in the background. That way these black outlined panels will jump to the foreground and be much more obvious. Okay, and let's throw a border on here, just a black border that we can take into Photoshop. So there is all of our line work. It's a little confusing, but we'll try to break it down and make it a little more simple in Photoshop. Okay, let's go. Okay, we're in Photoshop. We've brought in our line drawing of the car, this little pickup from Illustrator. And again, we have a lot of different layers stacked on top of here, but we're going to kind of do them in chunks so it's not too monotonous breaking down every little panel. But here's all our vehicle layers anyway. And here we'll bring in our background layers. Okay. So to start working on the car and driver and so forth, the first color layer, the first fill layer, is going to have a lot of these layers filled in one chunk just for sake of time. So looking at this, you see what I've done, even in the background, dropped in kind of this light grays and medium tones in here just to give some depth and little perspective in this really flat drawing. See what that does? Same thing on some of these layers on wheels and tires. Did basic fills like on the white walls, and then do a little bit of gray shading over here. These tires, I literally filled them everything with white and then just brushed in black and made these real dramatic highlights on top. Way crazier, brighter than they would be in real life. But there you go. And a few engine parts, these crazy intake stacks, and a few things, even white on the headers, and just brushed in some black below, and started doing some rendering up on this cab of this pickup. Did this medium gray, not unlike the background, and did some shadows down below by the rails and a little bit of highlight up above. Really simple, but a lot of panels missing, so let's put some more in here. Oop, let's go up here. Dropped in these side panels, this cowl side and door, and this other panel, this heat shield. Just started adding more, this grill shell and even this radiator hose and a few little things. So little by little, start rendering this. But like I say, for sake of time, I've kind of stacked some of these layers together so you can see what we've got here. This tail light, rendered that a little bit, even more than needed to be for a cartoon, but it helps. It just gives it a little dimension thrown in there. On this layer, I actually covered up some of his arm and so forth, but don't really care because we'll deal with that in a separate layer on my driver. Okay, over here we need some shadows between this heat shield and this header, so let's go ahead and put that in there. That, a little bit of rendering on this steering column, and a few other little things. I think this layer we put in that breather also. Yeah, valve cover breather and these bullet caps over these valve cover mounts. Okay, let's put in another layer, just ring by ring, started just shading this wheel, this front wheel. And what else we got? A little bit of highlights on there. See that? Just a little bit of white drop in there just to make it pop a little bit. The front hubcap, we wanted to do a little bit of reflection, so it's pretty rough with a brush tool. Kind of what that reflection would be in the background, these crazy shapes in the horizon. A little bit of shading below and maybe a little reflection from the wheel above on top. And the rear the same. This wheel just shows each one of these rings separately and just did some shading in there. Again, it's not realistic. It's a cartoon, so I didn't get too picky about what that looks like. The hubcap on the rear, it needed some reflection too, much like we did in the front. So this is what I did. Did a little white fill, then grabbed our black brush tool and just brushed in what the horizon might look like. A little bit of shading here, a little bit on top. And thought, man, it's getting kind of dark, so then I kind of brushed in some white around that to make that glow a little bit. Okay, and a few highlights back here. All right, now our driver, our little man in here. On the original drawing, his head didn't even show up. It was just up here in the shadow somewhere. So I kind of drawn him in so we can see this guy a little bit, his glasses and his pump and so forth. So here's our guy. We kind of did another layer, drop him in here, just gray fill and minimum shading. So our arm layer that's missing, let's put that line work in there and do our fills. Basic fills, white t-shirt, medium gray for his arm, so it matches his face, of course. And then we went ahead and did some tattoos. We'll put that in a couple different layers here. The basic lines, this little web on his elbow and this banner we put in here, and then the other one, like I said, wasn't sure what we were going to put in here, but we just put a mom in there. So we just had our outline, did a little tip shading on that part of the tattoo, and our heart in the background. So there is the basic shading we did on this car, this gray tone car. We still need a little better definition for our ground tone. So that line that we put in there, we used it to just drop in the grays with, but let's do a little shading in there. And it just creates a little bit of interest. And now we'll put a black border in there that we built in Illustrator. And then there you go. There's a little cartoon hot rod pickup. It's not very detailed. We have this crazy lines in here to simulate some kind of linkage on these carbs, this tri-power. It's not realistic at all. It's just for fun. So there you go. There's a little hot rod pickup cartoon. Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, please check out our other videos available on Rendering Insights.